Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor John V. Kofis is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
The title of this video session, Artificial Intelligence, Promise and Danger for Society, reflects the reality that indeed artificial intelligence, which remains in a fairly early phase of its evolution, although it had its origins during the middle of the 20th century, has the promise to benefit humanity in all endeavors, from medical technology to making tasks of human labor easier and actually improving the quality of human life. And when I say human life, I want to underscore all human beings, not just the very few who are wealthy and can afford the benefits of artificial intelligence technology in any of its phases. Now, on the other hand, there is also in the title of this session the word danger for society. And I want to focus more and more on that because the reality is even investors in artificial intelligence, experts in the field, engineers in artificial intelligence, have also been warning about the dangers to society in every respect for the use of artificial intelligence in the defense sector and the potential of artificial intelligence, which is no longer a potential, but the reality of taking part, facilitating war crimes. This much we have seen in Israel's genocide war in Gaza, and currently in 2026, in early 2026, February, March, April 2026, we also have seen it unfold in war crimes committed by Israel and the United States using artificial intelligence in precision bombing in Iran. So artificial intelligence is indeed a domain in the latest of technology that can indeed have many benefits, but also has the potential, especially, God forbid, as the saying goes, if at some point the field of artificial intelligence goes out of hand and algorithms which are determined are managed by human beings, this all goes out of hand, and somehow there is, perhaps by accident, nuclear holocaust, nuclear winter, because this technology will make it easier and because it's also susceptible to accidents and sabotage. I want to start by arguing that most people do not link artificial intelligence with the nuclear weapons sector and nuclear energy sector, especially nuclear weapons. They just do not. There are, however, scholars in the field, as well as people who have studied the history as well as the nature of nuclear weapons history and artificial intelligence history and the nature of artificial intelligence, that believe there is convergence in these two, that there are a lot of similarities. And I just want to provide an overview, because to do justice to this topic, by the way, to the topic of artificial intelligence, promise and danger for society, one would need an entire encyclopedia. So this is just a very brief overview on the specific issue of the comparisons between the nuclear weapons sector and artificial intelligence. In the late 1930s, the outbreak of World War II and the menace of the Axis power, the Third Reich, especially in Germany, combined with fascist Italy and Imperial Japan, compelled the United States to put together a team of scientists, eventually headed by Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, to create the so-called Manhattan Project and develop the atomic bomb. Shortly thereafter, this was in the early 40s, and by the mid 1940s, Oppenheimer had succeeded, and of course, the bomb was tested and then used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. Artificial intelligence was a bit later, but not that much later. It also had its origins in the early Cold War. Both the embryonic stage of the nuclear weapons field and artificial intelligence field have their genesis, and they have their impetus and the funding in the Cold War, and both primarily in the United States, by the way. The Eisenhower administration, 1953, amid the top secret program of building a hydrogen bomb and pursuing what eventually became known, once secret documents were released 3 decades later, as military Keynesianism, based on a document drafted during the Truman administration called National Security Council Document 68, which basically argued that the United States would spend the surplus in the civilian economy and pour it into defense and arm to the teeth. This is significant to this day because approximately, just roughly, the world spends, all countries in the world, some 195 countries in the world, spend roughly 3 trillion on defense combined. Just recently, this is mid-April 2026, the Trump administration submitted a budget for defense that calls for $1.5 trillion in defense spending for the next fiscal year. This is half of what the entire planet spends currently on defense. And a great deal of that money is going to the Silicon Valley companies, especially artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is driving all of this. And from the Industrial Revolution, just because I'm a historian and I want to stress this point, because economic historians and historians of industry and technology point this out, usually, invariably, when we look at history, industry and technology and science drive the advances in the defense sector historically. So here we are in 2026 amid 3 major areas of war. One is obviously between Russia and Ukraine. The other the most current that broke out. The second one that broke out a couple of years ago between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza. And the third, between the United States and its ally Israel against Iran, but also Lebanon, that Israel has targeted as part of its policy of Lebensraum, Greater Israel, in order to seize the opportunity of hitting Lebanon, of hitting Iran, along with the United States, so Israel can seize the territory in southern Lebanon, which houses a group known as Hezbollah, linked to Iran historically since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Artificial intelligence has played a role in all of this. There is a direct correlation between technology, the latest technology, and these military adventures that have created chaos in the civilian economy and caused high living standards for the population of the entire world. Although geographically limited, these wars, Russia, Ukraine, US and Israel against the Palestinian people, and then Iran again, and primarily, but also Lebanon in the process, and of course Yemen, these have destabilized the entire planet economically. Both the IMF and the World Bank have stated so in their reports. The impact has been very damaging to the civilian sector, to the civilian economy, and to prospects for GDP growth in 2026. Now, like all industries, artificial intelligence apologists, whether they're politicians, tech people, investors, chief executive officers, whoever they are, journalists, the apologists of artificial intelligence present the most positive image of the sector. First and foremost, they maintain that the sector is politically and socially neutral. This, of course, is not supported by empirical evidence. It is not politically neutral and certainly not socially neutral and not geographically neutral. And so we have indeed the first problem, namely the false advertising on the part of the apologists. Is the artificial intelligence sector politically neutral? All one has to do is follow the money, as the saying used to be back during the Nixon administration, when investigative journalists were trying to figure out everything from what happened in Watergate to what happened with Vietnam War. Just follow the money and see where it starts and see where it winds up. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by Silicon Valley, and especially by the largest high-tech firms, artificial intelligence firms, to grease the palms of politicians from the local to the state to the national level, in order to make sure that public policy is molded to favor the continued growth of artificial intelligence. One argument that they use is that this is for the progress of society, not for the real reason, which is to amass mass fortunes in the pockets of investors and those companies engaged in the sector. The reality is that artificial intelligence does not have as its goal the benefit for all people, because 15 trillion, as we'll see, and I'll point this out again because this is an important figure, 15 trillion in market capitalization of just 5 companies, the top 5 US companies alone, let alone what the rest of the world has in the advanced capitalist countries, from China to Japan to South Korea to Holland, France, Germany, Israel, and so forth. Just 5 companies, 15 trillion. This market capitalization is reflective of one thing only, that people who put money in this sector are not doing it to lose that money. They're doing it in order to make more money. And they're doing it in the hope of believing that this sector will transform the labor intensive economy of the world across the globe into a capital intensive. That's one. The second thing, that this sector will snatch enough job, according to Goldman Sachs, some 300 million minimum worldwide. This is an enormous number of jobs. And I'll mention in the US what the projections are about jobs lost to artificial intelligence in 2026 alone. They are banking on this, but they're also banking on artificial intelligence snatching these jobs and simultaneously driving down wages. So this is the reality. The reality is that investors, people with money who want to make more money, are in this sector for a reason. The reason is the realization that this sector, capital intensive sector, holds the promise of massive profits in the future. How do you make those massive profits, if not on the backs of labor and the middle class? The interesting thing and the contradiction here, by the way, is that this sector, from its origins in the 1940s, and then, of course, it takes off in the 1950s, has had the promise of making life better for people. Just like in 1953, President Eisenhower announced a program basically to justify the massive defense spending for the hydrogen bomb at the time, Atoms for Peace, in other words, applying the nuclear weapons project research and development into the civilian sector, nuclear technology. And by the way, there have been derivative benefits to the civilian economy. There's no doubt about that. But there are also nuclear weapons. There is also the reality of 5,500 nuclear warheads, which has been leveraged by the United States from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the present. There's also that. Not to mention tactical nuclear weapons, hybrid nuclear weapons, which are conventional nuclear. So that's the reality of it, okay? And in just 3 years after Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace, which we see Atoms for Peace, this is 2026, 1953, when Eisenhower announced this, 73 years ago. And here we are in 26, and Atoms for Peace is what the war between Iran defending itself against Israel and the United States is all about. The US and Israel, which have combined 6,000 warheads, are trying to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Atoms for Peace. At a time that they are using, because we are in the age of artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence in the weapon systems to prosecute this war. Now, on March 30th, there was a public opinion poll, 2026. And this public opinion poll indicated that 80% of the American people, 80%, are seriously concerned about the impact of artificial intelligence in every aspect of society. This is not, I want to underscore this, just in jobs lost, that they're going to lose their job. A lot of the concern, by the way, not surprisingly, I'm not surprised with this at all, comes on the part of young college graduates who are concerned that they won't have a job to go to because an artificial intelligence device will have that job taken from them. And they are correct, because the studies that have been done indicate, even by investment firms like Goldman Sachs, which has investments, BlackRock, which has investments, many companies that have investment, they admitted too, of course, they're going to take the jobs away. So 80% of the American people are concerned about any number of aspects. They're concerned about jobs lost. They are also concerned about the impact of privacy. Because artificial intelligence in the age of mass surveillance means very little privacy. Artificial intelligence also means authoritarianism made easier with a technofix. And it is not surprising that many of the tech giant companies, as well as billionaires and multimillionaires invested in artificial intelligence, have supported forever war policies of the United States and have supported the road to authoritarianism. They, in fact, are queasy. They are concerned about the idea that that government is to regulate them. I recently found out, because this is not my field. I'm a historian. I have delved into this. I have published articles as well as a chapter in a book on neoliberalism about artificial intelligence. But I had no idea until recently that a number of Silicon Valley companies actually are interested in transcending government regulation and transcending all the regulatory mechanisms that come with the supervision of the state over the private sector. And one of the reasons that the Trump administration is interested in Greenland, one of the reasons, although we want to have Greenland for national security, is also because of the reality that Greenland has, which, by the way, doesn't belong to the United States. It is part of Denmark. It also has rare earth minerals, which are key for defense and the high-tech sector. But Silicon Valley companies have been looking at Greenland. They have also been looking at Honduras. They've been looking at a number of Caribbean islands, other parts around, mostly in the global south, by the way, so they can establish themselves there and be far away from the watchful regulatory eye of governments. And there they want to operate like a state with their own currencies. It's no secret that some of these companies, from NVIDIA to Apple to Meta, Google, and so on, they want their own cryptocurrency, which Trump has been promoting, okay, among others in the world, but especially the United States. and has integrated into the monetary system, and wants by 2027 to have that integrated. This falls in line with exactly what policy Silicon Valley is pursuing. So these people are not satisfied with just making a buck. They want to be beyond the watchful eye of any government or international legal mechanisms monitoring, and operate above the law. This is, of course, very scary. Now, so far, they have been called by governments, especially the European Union and even the United States, to testify, to CEOs to testify and their experts to testify, and to explain certain things with regard to privacy, with regard to the impact of their sector on children, for example. Okay, that's true. But their ideal, their nirvana, if you will, their Shangri-La is to be above all of this. Now, the easiest way to accomplish it is indeed to set up some, in some place where they are beyond the reach of the law of developed countries that have some modicum of supervision, some modicum of regulatory mechanisms. This is alarming because zero accountability to the public, or very little accountability, and whatever that is, it's camouflaged with flowery presentations about, look what we're offering to society. And besides, if we don't do it, China will do it. So there is the dimension of scaring the public about the geopolitical artificial intelligence race between the United States and China, between the G7 and China. So the idea, well, look, they're doing it, and do you want them to be ahead of us? So in the name of national security, subordinate human rights, subordinate your rights as a private citizen, subordinate the Constitution of the United States to the advancement of artificial intelligence, and we know best. Let us decide what's best for you. This is the attitude, unfortunately. The taxpayers, in the meantime, have been subsidizing heavily this sector, by the way. Now, here's the interesting thing. Here's a sector that has been heavily subsidized from the Defense Department back during the Eisenhower administration to the present day, heavily subsidized. And yet they don't want public accountability, although the taxpayer is paying for it. The public is paying for it. So this is where we are at with this sector. They are especially concerned about making sure that the government does not inhibit any of their schemes for labor replacement mechanisms that they are planning, from Amazon, by the way, to NVIDIA, that their technology entails. And they also distance themselves from the idea that this technology not only replaces humans with machine. And by the way, one of the things that Trump did, one of the policies he undertook and placed Elon Musk, a heavy investor in artificial intelligence, in the first few months when Trump took over in 2025, is to basically reduce the size of the federal bureaucracy on the pretext that the US government was going to save money to the bureaucracy, when in fact the government was turning around and planning to sign major contracts to make the federal bureaucracy less labor intensive and to throw multi-billion-dollar contracts to the Silicon Valley companies, to the tech bros, as they're called, who, by the way, provided enormous amounts of money. If you look at the inauguration of Donald Trump, behind him on January 20th, 2025, were tech people. They were Silicon Valley people. I think all of them, or most of them. Cryptocurrency and Silicon Valley. Okay? So then Musk goes in and tries to gut the federal bureaucracy, eventually they eliminate the Department of Education, do as much cutting, especially in social programs, as possible. And just recently, April 2026, just for the record, Trump made it clear, perhaps inadvertently, he didn't mean to, that we can't pay for everything. The federal government can't pay for Medicare and childcare and all these social programs. They can't pay for human social development like China, which has been increasing it in the last 10 years. The US wants to cut it sharply. And then we find out why. Because trillions are going when, of course, we found out immediately why, because he announced 1.5 trillion just for defense, and a good chunk of that to artificial intelligence and high tech. It's no accident that when you're in Washington, D.C., by the way, you're in the metro going out toward Reagan National Airport and past Pentagon City and the Pentagon stops, the advertisements, the billboard advertisements on the metro stations there are from high-tech companies and communications companies. You're thinking, why are they advertising? This is the Pentagon. This is Pentagon City and Pentagon. Why are they advertising? That's because they're providing the materials for the war machine, the War Department. It's not called the Pentagon anymore. It's the War Department. So there's money for that. As Senator Bernie Sanders correctly said, we have a lot of money for that. We don't have money for your children. We don't have money for your health care. We don't have money for subsidizing low-cost housing. We don't have money for that. Social development, no money. Corporate subsidies, corporate welfare, and defense spending, yeah, we have money for that. There is a reason for that. I said it earlier, and I'll repeat it. The Silicon Valley corporations and individual multimillionaires and billionaires are spending hundreds of millions in campaign contributions to both political parties. Their lobbyists, their lawyers in Washington, D.C. and in Arlington, Virginia are very busy working the halls of Congress to make sure that the vision of America, make America great again, is a militarized police state, artificial intelligence, futuristic vision right out of a Fritz Lang motion picture from the interwar era or a Franz Kafka novel. This is where we are in the 21st century, that the oligarchy, the tech oligarchy, is determining policy. This is the same tech oligarchy, by the way, that found its way into, according to the Department of Justice files, into the Epstein, the thousands and thousands of files called the Epstein case files. That's the oligarchy that is in charge. This is why some social scientists and commentators maintain that this tech elite is engaged in social criminal activities. They're not legally criminal at all. They're not doing anything illegal, as far as we know, at least. But the pursuit of public policy, which they determine because their money greases the palms of politicians, both political parties, by the way, those policies are detrimental to social development and to the open society, a democratic society, a multi-cultural and a society that is based on human rights and civil rights. The techno-billionaires are determining social policy and economic policy to the detriment. Statistics bear this out. The Department of Labor is not hiding them. They're there for anyone to see where we have been in the last 30 years. Sharp rise in the incomes of and total wealth of the richest 1%, drop of the bottom 2/3 of the American people who live paycheck to paycheck. The corporate subsidies are part of the problem. Hundreds of billions every year, combined with now a proposal for 1.5 trillion for defense. This doesn't include, because of the accounting methods in the Defense Department, by the way, the way they calculate, they don't include the interest on the debt paid because of the money has to be borrowed to support that 1.5 trillion. They don't even include that. They separate that out. So this is detrimental to the rest of society. This is why I entitled this segment Artificial Intelligence Promise and Danger for Society. This is the danger of society. The other part of it is control and manipulation of the digital infrastructure and the use of the digital infrastructure as leverage in the political arena and in the social field, in the business field. This is enormous leverage to have, by the way. And they have been engaged in this and have made it very clear that they are the ones who have the levers in this sector of power. Now, they again justify it in the name of commercial progress. This is for the best. Other countries are doing it. Why shouldn't we do it? Why shouldn't we have a leg up on the enemy out there? Primarily China, but even these days, the United States has made it very clear under Trump. The world is the enemy. It's not just China, it's everybody. After all, the United States is not exactly on friendly terms with either of its neighbors, Mexico and Canada, and now it's considering getting out of NATO. So France is the enemy. France recently sided with China and Russia when it came to the vote on the war that the US and Israel conducted, have been conducting, it's still going on, against Iran. So the enemy is everybody. Now, the dangers of artificial intelligence also go beyond, if we take the long view, in a society of biosynthetic engineering, in a society that produces the perfect androids that emulate humans, in a society of humans becoming like humanoids, like artificial intelligence devices, like androids, in other words. That's a society that scientists years ago, and many French scholars, of course, have written about this. If you're interested, you can Google transhumanism and you can find more information on this. We are evolving into a society of transhumanism. And while some may argue, you know what, what's so bad about that? After all, the elderly who have no one to care after them and can afford it, of course, assuming they can afford it, can make themselves available of artificial intelligence devices and make their lives easier and less lonely and so forth. And after all, artificial intelligence helps in medical technology, in surgery, and it does. Let's be clear, it does. It helps in everything that humans can do. This is assuming there is public policy that regulates very heavily, very strictly this sector. This assumes that there is regulation that does not gear artificial intelligence heavily toward defense, toward the destruction of societies because of forever war doctrines on the part of countries that have a long-standing history of imperialism and militarism. This assumes that societies are democratic and are not declaring their own people, their own citizens, whether they are migrants or not, or native to the land, have been born there, they're the enemy. So it assumes a lot. It assumes that the sector is indeed something intended to benefit. But if you allow the corporate investor to make the decision of, I only have one criterion: profit, do whatever you want, just profit, then everything goes. And that is exactly what has been. So what we're left with is the wonderful and very creative early 19th century novel of the English author Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. Frankenstein is what is being created. Now, Mary Shelley she lived through and she wrote, she was influenced in writing Frankenstein, and artificial intelligence is the modern Frankenstein, by the way. She was influenced by a movement in during the English Industrial Revolution in the early 19th century. During the Napoleonic Wars, there was a movement called the Luddite movement. Ned Ludd it takes its name after him, was the leader of that. And basically, a lot of people misunderstand that, and who have not studied the Luddite movement, and believe that the working class, especially the textile workers in England, were destroying the new machines that were invented. The inventions were an anathema to the working class, especially the textile workers, because they were replacing their jobs. Actually, that wasn't really the issue. The issue was then, as it is today, public policy. That the owners of the factories, the textile factories back then, and politicians back then, just like the owners of the Silicon Valley factories and the investors today and the politicians today, are using the sector to carry out class warfare, again, at the expense of labor, to lower wages, to lower standards, as safety standards, collective contracts, and so forth. Across the world, by the way, you have seen the attack on the working class. And this is in everything from refusing to raise the minimum wage, but easily raising the retirement age, to either watering down or eliminating collective bargaining that protects workers, safety standards for workers. And this is exactly what the Luddite movement was about. Now, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, it was a warning that look what we're creating here. Look what we're creating a monster here. And we're creating a monster to manipulate this monster. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because and this is the stuff of obviously novels even today about artificial intelligence and motion pictures that have been done on this, which are the machines going out of control. The machines run on algorithms, and algorithms are punched in by humans. The machine in itself is the servant of the human. And it's the human that we must be very afraid of, not the machine. Just like back then when Mary Shelley was writing Frankenstein, It's the same thing today. Artificial intelligence can be devastating because it has been. In 2026, it is estimated worldwide by the International Labor Organization that 86 million jobs will be lost. Some other organizations have the number above 100 million jobs worldwide. And just as in Mary Shelley's era, the Luddite era, when she wrote Frankenstein, today, artificial intelligence companies of the West, especially US, but they're not alone, they're all the, well, capitalism is global, operates on the same laws. Artificial intelligence staff, workers in the global South, because a lot of these companies operate in the global South, have indeed been experiencing wage pressure. Okay? Not rising wages, because one would think, well, you're in the high-tech sector. There is a hierarchy in the labor force that always was, by the way, from the Industrial Revolution, first Industrial Revolution in England in the 18th century to the present. There is obviously a hierarchy of labor all the way up to what Vladimir Lenin called the labor aristocracy. Okay. However, we have seen downward pressure on wages because of artificial intelligence. So what the danger is here is not that this is coming at some point in the future. It's here now. There is downward pressure. And job losses are not something that's coming out in mid-2030s. It's here now. Estimates are that at least 86 million will be lost this year. Some, like I said, have it over 100 million. That's a lot of people to be losing their jobs. The question is, what does a society do? How does a government manage hundreds of millions unemployed? What would be the social consequences? In the mid-19th century, about the same time as Marx and Engels were writing, there was an English journalist, author. His name is Henry Mayhew. And he wrote a wonderful book entitled London Labor and the London Poor, where he basically outlines everything about what the consequences of the Industrial Revolution were in London. Everything from rise in prostitution to homelessness to beggars to thieves to crime, alcoholism, the social chaos. It is indeed a warning about what has happened before will happen again. And it will happen on a mass scale because artificial intelligence is such an industry that it will replace enormous numbers of people, just like the industrial machine, just like the Industrial Revolution in its nascent phase comes in and creates this surplus labor force. What does society do with the surplus labor force? When, as Charles Darwin in evolutionary biology pointed out in the 19th century, all organisms have an instinct for survival. They will do anything to survive. How does state policy formulate in order to make sure that there is equilibrium, that there is harmony in society, and civilization moves forward? I want to thank you for watching. I want to invite you to ask questions, write comments, and by all means, join this channel. Thank you very much.